Well, hello, and welcome again to the 2012fad.com. I'll be your host for this evening, and my name is Charlie Bluehawk. Last night we talked about right and wrong, and I'll be 53 years old this month, and frankly, I've never met anyone who didn't know the difference between right and wrong. It had nothing to do with their religion or anything, their political affiliation, their nationality. Everyone knows the difference between right and wrong. I can see it in their eyes. I know that they know. I can see that they know. And it's the choice they make to do things that are right or to do things that are wrong. Our masters theoretically have no souls. And since they worship Satan, whether Satan exists or not, none of my business, our masters believe that Satan exists, that she's a physical person. Our masters are very religious people. They believe that Satan is God. You and I would call Satan Yahweh is her ancient name. And the good God, theoretically, is, what is the good God's name? Amalek. So we have our masters who theoretically think right is wrong, good is evil, left is right, up is down, war is peace. So they may not have a choice. This may be, from their reality, this is what's correct. Their Mandarin class, their direct servants, are human, and they do have souls. The Bush family, the Cheney family, Ben Bernanke, Obama. These are human beings who have chosen wrong as a way of life. And in the end, they'll be left behind with the rest of us to die, but they're frankly too stupid to realize that. So tonight I thought I would tell you a Betelgeuse fairy tale. And I call this a fairy tale because I'm pulling information from a lot of different sources. Some of them are me, some of them are people I've never met. But I have an uncomfortable feeling that what I'm about to tell you, this fairy tale, is, if not exactly accurate, is pretty darn close. I know I'm missing at least one key fact, maybe more, but the overall story, I think, is accurate. But because I cannot tell you, go here, put your hand on the box and say, yes, it's real, I have to qualify this as a fairy tale. It begins with a series of very bizarre articles and even more bizarre denials of the explosion of a star we call Betelgeuse. The English, for some reason, call it Betelgeuse. I like the English way better, frankly. Now, if I recall, and this I'm not accurate on, I don't think, I believe that Betelgeuse, the star, is 524 light years from us. I think it's that. You'll have to look that one up. I'll tell you right now, I can't remember. It's a long way away. Now, Betelgeuse, if it did explode, and we're just seeing it now, means that this star exploded 524 years ago, because a light year is the distance that light will travel in 365 days. Light travels both as waves and particles and at different speeds, but we'll just leave that for now, and we'll give it the general speed of 186,000 miles per second. So light travels pretty fast. So Betelgeuse for you and me is a long way away. It's a long walk for us. What caught my attention, because I frankly didn't care, what caught my attention in the back of my very slow, dull-witted brain was the fact that all of these articles of Betelgeuse exploding were immediately followed by tremendous amounts of media hysteria denying that Betelgeuse had exploded. And again, frankly, I didn't care one way or the other. But lately I've been thinking, and in the very sort of plodding, pedantic, predictable way my simple brain works, I began to think this through, because Betelgeuse is mentioned very prominently in the works of a fellow by the name of H.P. Lovecraft. He's a horror novelist. Now, I know from personal experience there are certain things, well, quite a lot of things, you just can't tell people down at the grocery store, the drugstore, sitting around the coffee shop, There are certain things you just can't tell them, because suddenly you'll, like me, you'll find yourself all alone. And so you know that these are not your nightmares. They're somebody else's. You want to get them out of you. So what do? Well, what I did was I started reading books because I was tired of these nightmares because, frankly, these were not my nightmares, and I was really tired of carrying around someone else's burden. And I certainly couldn't tell these stories at the local coffee shop, or I'd suddenly find myself very unwelcome. These real-life encounters for this fellow H.P. Lovecraft must have been horrifying beyond imagination. And I'm only guessing, but I'm guessing he wrote these things and made them sound like fantasy, horror stories. This is something you can do on your own. You can read the works of H.P. Lovecraft through, a couple of them. They're basically all the same. They talk about monsters. Huge, monstrous creatures miles long that are basically giant diseases that roamed the universe beyond millennia ago. And they were finally defeated by something he called the Elder Race. The Elder Race were giants, physically giants. He described them as being cyclopses, one-eyed giants. Very, very good, very, very kind, very, how do I say this? They had the mentality of engineers. They were very practical people. They saw a problem, they came up with a solution, and they just basically used brute force to solve problems. Because in their point of view, from what I can tell, you see a problem, you solve it, it's solved permanently. Now, the story from H.P. Lovecraft is that the ancient old ones, these monsters, these creatures, literally from hell, were trapped, finally, imprisoned by the Elder Race, by the giants, in a star called Betelgeuse. It was their prison. They couldn't be destroyed. They were eternal. It's like the devil. You can't destroy the devil. You have to lock her up somewhere. You can't destroy God. You have to push her out of the way or something. They exist forever. So what do you do with something that's pure, malevolent evil, a true disease that's the size of a city? You lock it up. We actually have stories of this from our own ancient times. I believe it was Greek mythology, history, where we had the Titans. And again, you can look this up. The Titans were monsters. They were gigantic, massive, mindless creatures who just destroyed. And they were finally imprisoned in Hades, I believe, by Zeus, who actually was one of their descendants. So we actually have, in our own racial memory, stories of monsters, huge, gigantic, mindless, blubbering creatures who were actually imprisoned for all time in a place called Hades. And then we have H.P. Lovecraft. Maybe he read the stories, who didn't? But I also noticed that whenever stories about giants, whether 100 feet tall or 14 foot tall, make it accidentally into Western media, again, there's that same media frenzy. Kill the story, kill the story, kill the story. There was a story 2 years ago, I think now, from China, where the Chinese had found 14-foot tall people, their burial chamber. Obviously, they were royalty. They were, done up in royal stuff, crowns and things. But they were 14 feet tall. And from the remnants of the corpses, they were white skinned with red hair. Another theme in our history. Now, Native American people have known about this forever because they have stories to this day of a race of giants, 14 feet tall, red hair, pale skin, who were, well, they were monsters. They were some sort of degenerate form of giant, and they would regularly raid on the Native American villages, stealing women and children and, well, I was going to say cattle, buffalo, and would eat them. And the Native American tribes actually finally banded together and wiped them out. Apparently they were not very bright. But I note that whenever stories about giants manage to leak into the newspapers in the West, there's an immediate gibbering madness of the media to crush the stories. And that's the only thing that got my attention finally about the blowing up of Betelgeuse blowing up and then media frenzy to say no, it never happened. I don't know if it's true or not. This is just a fairy tale. I then also noted that Western scientists are finally getting around to believing and understanding the concept that the universe that you and I live in is actually inside of a giant bubble of energy. The entire universe, millions, millions, billions of galaxies, of which you and I live in one, make up the universe. And this universe is inside a bubble of energy of some kind. Now, the same Western scientists are also now finally admitting something that Eastern philosophy has known for 100,000 years, that multiple dimensions exist in this bubble. Basically, it means that you and I exist in 10 different forms at the same time in the same physical space. We're all a little different because in each of these different realities, you and I have made different decisions. But we're sort of basically kind of the same. We're in that sort of range of different realities. There's also stories of some monks, actually, who discovered a way of recording sounds that happened in the past. That's interesting. So I guess the simplest way to describe the universe where you and I live is a record album, good old-fashioned 33.3 LP vinyl on a record player. And it used to be you could stack 5 or 6 or 7 of these record albums on top of each other on the spindle, and the machine would automatically play each record one at a time. So imagine each dimension, each reality where you and I are living at the same time in the same space is a record album. And you're laying them one on top of the other on the record player. And the only way we know where we are in time and in space and in dimension is when the album that you and I exist on drops onto the plate and begins to spin, and the arm of the record player lifts up, swings over, and the needle touches down on the album. That would be the album, would be the reality you and I are living in. The record would be this reality. And each of the grooves in the record is a moment in time. So if you could somehow lift yourself up out of that groove on the record album and look over to the next groove, you could look forward or backward in time. And if you were really spunky, you could jump over the groove and move through time as well. A lot of information, sorry about that. But that's basically, as far as I can tell, the simplest way to describe the universe where you and I live. Now, Western scientists say that there are 10 dimensions existing. You and I are simultaneously existing at exactly the same time, in exactly the same space, in 10 different realities. Realities, to make it even more simple, is a different frequency. The atoms of my body are vibrating at 100 megahertz. So are yours. So is your cat. So is your cup of coffee. That way we can interact with these things around us. But just like the radio in your car, when you change the frequencies, you go from channel to channel looking for country western or pop or classic. As you change the frequency of the radio dial, it means that you're listening to different music because they're being broadcast at the same time, in the same space, but at a different frequency. So today, you can listen to pop, tomorrow you can listen to rock. Why? Because you change the frequency from 100.1 on your FM radio dial to 100.2. That's how you and I can exist at the same time in exactly the same space as the other 9 of us, wherever they are. But of course, Western scientists are kind of limited by who pays their bills, where do they get their paychecks, so they have to follow the party line. So it's more likely that there are thousands, maybe millions of other dimensions that you and I are living in simultaneously. I have seen, in my waking existence here, I've seen buildings appear and disappear. I've seen a circuit city appear overnight in the parking lot of a tire company in a place called Silver Lake, California, a suburb of Los Angeles. And I'm driving by and I'm going, whoa, wow. And yet I'm the only one who noticed. There were no news crews, there were no camera crews, there were no police cordoning off the scene. There weren't mobs of people just, their mouths hanging open in wonder. Nobody noticed. Same thing here in Europe. I'm walking down the street, all of a sudden, it's a cul-de-sac. Used to be, day before, it was a throughway to the main boulevard. Today it's a cul-de-sac. Obviously been there for years. Again, no news crews, no film crews, no crowds. I'm the only one who notices. So the only thing I can think of is either A, I'm crazy, which would be nice. B, I have an embolism in my brain. Lord, I wish it would pop and just get it over with. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, so those are left out. Or I'm just nuts. I'd go for nuts if I had a choice. But it doesn't seem to be the case. I seem to be functional. So my only explanation at that point is the frequency of the atoms of my body change from 100.1 to 100.2. And so I'm in a different version of our realities. And what I'm seeing, which is new to me, is normal, everyday stuff to the people who've lived there all their lives. Now, in my sleep, I haven't dreamed in years. And when I do sleep, it's not very much. But I really haven't slept in years. I started doing meditation when I was trapped out in the desert years ago. And I discovered I could actually leave my body. That's kind of cool. And at one point, I actually floated up above the earth and was about to go, cruising. And I hit something. And I hit it so hard, I actually bounced back. My consciousness bounced back into my body, and my body just sort of sat up and go, whoa, what the heck was that? And I'd hit something. And as far as I could tell, it was a barrier, a shield. We were inside of a bubble ourselves. Years later, when I was studying Qigong with a very intelligent, very powerful man, he actually somehow managed to get me past that bubble. And all of a sudden, I was doing meditation with him, and my consciousness was just cruising through the galaxy. I was passing star systems like you would walk down the street and pass stores. I do that in my sleep now, without any conscious interest in doing so. I'd rather, dream about girls. But I go to places which I believe, again, this is where the fairy tale part comes in, where I believe I'm going and seeing and experiencing other realities. And in one of the other realities I seem to go to quite a lot is a planet, an Earth, just like ours, but it has no moon. And the ancient legends talk about the moon coming into orbit around the Earth, and is as a spaceship is where our masters came from. They don't like spaceships, they like traveling in big natural satellites that convert. Our moon is very interesting. They call it tidal lock, which is just a euphemism for saying they have no clue in hell why. Our moon is in perfect synchronous orbit with us, where we only see one side of the moon ever. It's I'm not a mathematician, but I'm guessing that it's mathematically impossible to get two naturally occurring objects in nature to sync up like that. But on this other reality where I go, and it must be way, way up the chain somewhere because it's us, but it's really different, there is no moon. And because there's no moon, there's no tidal force. And because of that, and I don't know why, all of the seas, all of the oceans of this other world are only 300 feet deep. The water is sort of salty, but it's pretty clear, and it's very clean. The whole world is clean. And in those cities, on this basically a chain of islands, all the continents seem to have been washed out, so we all live on quite a few islands. No war that I've ever seen, or, I'm not there that often, but it doesn't look to be. Pretty peaceful, and the cities are not very overpopulated. But the key thing that you notice about the cities instantly is they were built to accommodate giants. And when I say giants, I'm talking about people 100 feet tall. That you and I standing next to them would be about, the height of a Barbie doll. And then I remember H.P. Lovecraft and the elder race, the giants, who fought evil and locked it away in Betelgeuse. And I look at these cities, and these cities were obviously designed to last forever. And they were obviously designed to coexist at least two species, ours, you and me, and the giants. These cities are built on, I don't even know a good word, gigantic scale, gargantuan scale. But they were also built, obviously, to accommodate us, the little people. And they're made of stone of some kind, 12 feet thick, monstrous, huge. You and I standing under the roof of one of these, you have your own environment, you have your own ecosystem inside these buildings, but they're obviously made to last forever. And they obviously have been here a very long time. And they're self-sustaining. Fresh water comes in, it's hot and cold, there's electricity, wastewater is pumped out. Everything is done automatically. And I've seen in these cities, universities, schools, human beings, you and I, shopping malls, gardens, and the entire city has the effect of not artistic. It was made obviously by engineers. Brute force gets the job done. End of story. No artistry was gone into this, but it was obviously made to protect us from event to event, because from the look of these buildings, it looks like they've had a lot of lightning strikes. They've had a lot of weathering. And as we've chatted about in the past, when the dead brown dwarf star passes between us and the sun, since the universe is electrical, there's going to be electrical interference, there's going to be electrical discharge, lightning, planetary lightning. And in every civilization on this planet, you go back to the old cave paintings, and it's very clearly depicted that there was lightning like rain, or lightning that was so continuous it looked like rain, leaping from planet to planet. You look at pictures of Mars, and you can see huge, I don't want to use the word monstrous over and over again, but you see these massive scars on the face of Mars that could only come from an electrical scorch of, forgive the expression, biblical proportion. So what's different between the reality where you and I are right now and this other reality I seem to see and go and visit? And I came back with some really cool designs for a in-the-kitchen wood-burning stove/oven, which is really cool, and I'm going to build that whenever I have a home again, because the design is wickedly cool. But they're just people living. But the point is, what's the difference between the giants who built that city for themselves and for us to coexist, and the giants in this reality? What's the difference? The moon. If our masters came here on the moon, they didn't come to the other reality because there was no moon. Why would anyone care if you publish pictures of giants or the skeletons of giants and they're fake? Well, it's a fake picture. Who cares? I've lived in Photoshop for years. I can do any of these things. No big deal. So the point is, why would you care? Why would you care that some people in India claimed repeatedly that they found the skeletons of 100-foot tall human beings? Who cares? If it's a Photoshop fake, who cares? But the hysteria of the media to denounce these discoveries sort of, again, gets me thinking. Our masters are cowards. Excuse me. They're bullies, they're thugs. If the giants, the elder race in our world, where you and I are right now, at one time fought our masters and drove them into the earth to keep them away from us, they saw our masters as they truly are, cowards, gibbering, just sobbing, wetting themselves in fear. So the masters, our masters, have two problems. One, they were defeated at one time, and two, they were seen as they truly are. For some reason, the majority of the giants left our world, the elder race, and went to fight a much bigger battle. Because, like all businesses, there is a hierarchy, and our masters, I'm guessing, are at the lowest rung of the management chain. They're like junior management at best, always seeking through backstabbing and lying to elevate themselves, as our masters plan to do with their harp weapon, lure their god, their Satan, to earth, trap her here, hoping to destroy her. That should be fun to watch. And taking her place as the devil, raising themselves up to be gods. Well, good luck with that. Can they do it? I don't see how, but that's their plan. Good on you, they got a plan. So why would our masters be so obsessed with crushing the stories of Betelgeuse exploding and of giants? Well, maybe, as all junior management is, they're terrified that the boss will find out how badly they've screwed up. Oh, by the way, you can actually do a keyword search on the internet, out of place artifacts, 4 words, out of place artifacts. And you will find a piece of rock, which originally was just wet sand next to a riverbed, where there is a human footprint, identical to you or me, actually a series of them, crisscrossing the footprints of dinosaurs, fairly large ones, crisscrossing the footprints of giants. In this case, people with a stride of 12, from their stride they could tell they were 12 to 14 feet tall, the women being about 12 feet tall, the men being about 14 feet tall. You can look this up on the internet, out of place artifacts. So yes, there were giants in this world. If our masters are so terrified of the knowledge that Betelgeuse exploded 524 years ago, that means, like all junior management, they had to report to somebody. So I'm guessing that you, or the elder race, the giants, could imprison the ancient old ones, the slavering, gibbering, mindless, killing diseases that are miles tall. You could imprison them, but you couldn't actually stop them from communicating. Which gets us back to the other fairy tale, that our masters are reptiles, reptilian, that our masters are possessed, their souls eaten, and possessed by fallen angels, which gets us back to the old Christian story, and it's also a story you find in the Bhagavad Gita, of gods fighting each other. And in the Christian story, Satan is thrown down into hell, probably out of the universe, and all of those who followed her went with her. But being, kind of bitchy, she decided to continue the war from outside our bubble that Western scientists have finally admitted exists. So God, in her infinite wisdom, shifted her lover out of this universe into another one, out of this bubble. But being spiteful and mean, she's come back. And she is remotely controlling through her minions the reptile people. Don't laugh too hard, because you and I actually have reptilian DNA in us. And this is also something you can look up. Look up the stages of development of the human fetus, and you will very clearly discover that during the gestation of the human fetus inside of the womb of the mother, we go through a purely reptilian phase. Now, look up the same studies on apes, monkeys, chimpanzees, and the development of fetuses. They don't have that. You and I are more closely related to reptiles than we are to monkeys. There's something that'll make you sick to your stomach. So who are our masters reporting to? Well, there must be an intermediary communication, corporate communication, between the junior management, our masters, and Satan, Yahweh, wherever she is. it makes sense that her direct servants would be the Ancient Old Ones, the things that H.P. Lovecraft wrote about, Cthulhu, and all of these gibbering, mindless, hateful creatures. Probably Satan's first attempt at creating life on her own. Nice job. It also would explain why today junior management in the Satan Corporation, actually the UN calls it the Lucifer Trust. They had to change the name to the, I forget what they changed it to, but it used to be called the Lucifer Trust at the UN. Look that one up. That'll slay you. It would explain why our masters are also obsessed with creating grotesque forms of life, combining and recombining DNA with humans, pigs, sheeps with spiders. The chupacabra, if you look that one up, and I don't remember how to spell it, sounds like one of these horrific experiments. So junior management does what every junior manager does in a big corporation. They emulate the boss. So Satan, in her infinite unwisdom, created the Ancient Old Ones, these gibbering, slavering, mega creatures that are just basically diseases miles tall. She probably also converted a few people of their own free will to her cause. People who can't actually be here either, which might be the fallen angels. And the fallen angels are probably the ones giving orders to the quote-unquote reptiles, our masters, junior management. Again, this is just a fairy tale. Just a fairy tale. We're sitting around the campfire, making s'mores and discussing, wouldn't this be weird if, and hoping to God we're all wrong. I know I'm missing something. I just can't figure it out. But I know that the dead brown dwarf star is pretty much moments away. I know that massive happenings are going on in the South Pole. So we all do. You just look up Antarctic expeditions, and you'll find on the web, and you'll find some real interesting stories that make absolutely no sense. My concern is the fairy tale I just told you is pretty close to what's actually happened, which means you and I have to rethink everything we know. The war between God and her lover, the devil, between Amalek and Yahweh, was real. If it was real, not only are we still caught between two girlfriends, two lovers having a spat, and we're the children having to, choose which parent we want to go with. It's actually more than that. You and I have been on this planet for 2.5 billion years. It's time, way past time we grew up, which means that we're part of the war. And it gets back to right and wrong. Which side are you going to choose? I think it's appropriate at this point to give you an ancient Celtic blessing, a toast, a hope for a friend or for a beloved stranger. May you live as long as you wish. May you love as long as you live. For the 2012fad.com, this is Charlie Blue Hawk. The 2012 Fad is brought to you by Coffee and Blood, Love Letters Between the Dead, a series of 5 erotica horror novels about a fallen angel fighting his way back to regain his own soul, and how the CIA war against the human race, their black magic, captures and traps him in the body of a mind-controlled slave designed to hunt down and to kill their god, their Satan.